always tries to bring compelling guests with compelling stories and interesting backgrounds, and that's what the show is catered on and created on. And I have the very distinguished honor to have a very unique guest today who's willing to share his life story, his authorship, and a certified five rhythm teacher, as well as a established person with a lot of history of his own previous radio show. Mr. Michael Stone, how are you, sir?
Hey, Rashad, it's really good to be with you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I always get honored when the inbox fills up with people, who are willing to take time out of their busy schedules to talk to me. And you have such an interesting background that I literally did a double take, right? Because I'm like, this can't be real, right? Like, this guy has such a fascinating background. Obviously you can tell your story. I don't want to tell it for you.
Yeah.
Can you give some background and insight as to what made Michael Stone? Because I'd never heard of a background like this before.
Well, yeah, I'm 80 now, so I got a little time and grade here, but
yeah. Bless you for that.
I was kind of born into a trauma situation. All of us have our trauma, whether they recognize it or not. It's either individual, collective, ancestral, familial.
Right.
But mine was a little intense. My parents were at Pearl Harbor. My father was a fighter pilot, and my mother was assistant to the commander of the Pacific Fleet. And they were in the middle of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which, of course, is how, my early, I was born right after that, between the dropping of 2 atomic bombs. And both my parents were very impacted by that, what they call post-traumatic, what they call PTSD now, they call shell shock. My mother became very erratic. Unfortunately, thought that I was the enemy and tried to kill me the first 2.5 years. And then
oh my God.
Yeah, she would put a pillow over my head when I would cry, and she didn't have any way of sensing. But I've made peace with these things. I had many more. I found my mother hanging at 2.5. She'd taken her own life. And then my father was just absent after the loss of his wife. And I was shipped around from different places, several stepmothers, pretty intense. And early abuse. A lot of alcohol and rage, and so as a teenager I was pretty wild. I was smoking at probably 9, drinking by 10 or 11, taking drugs, stealing cars.
It was bad. I don't want to interrupt you, but like, it's also to the case where there was not any real tools to sit back and say how somebody would cope with a situation like that. Like, now you have all the avenues where people can get help. Like, you're left really, I'd imagine, to your own vices. Your parents were to what, hey, there's not the resources that there are right now for them to be able to go through help and treatment for those traumatic situations and things like that.
And all of, Rashad, it's not, mine is pretty intense and dramatic. Made a good book, Traumatized, a love story, healing the wounds that separate, alienate, and marginalize is my book. But, now it's really been a blessing for the healing that's taken place over so many. I mean, I had many other traumas. One of my stepmother's maiden name was Severe. That's you gotta have a sense of humor, and the other one was the person my father left to go to my mother, and then I got dropped off there. So that wasn't too healthy. And then I went through, at 7, found my dog hanging. They tied him up and he tried to follow me to school, and came home and found him on the fence. So like you said, it's like, well, that couldn't happen. Well, it all did happen. And then, I actually started a healing process in the 70s, started to get a grip on things. I realized when I did a particular training back then that I had this experience like, oh my God, mean I'm responsible for my own effing life? I was walking through San Francisco and I just had this epiphany, and then things started to get, pretty good. I had a wonderful wife and a child. And then when my daughter was 4, my wife was murdered, raped and murdered. Uh,
Yeah, I read about that.
and my daughter was 4 years old then. So
I mean,
that brought a bunch of more stuff, and so it could have killed me. I could have gone down in drugs, which was alcohol and drugs were a part of my early life,
yeah,
and something in me started to look at, okay, what am I going to do with what I've been given?
right.
And I got really interested in spirituality and studying the mystical sciences.
Hmm.
And then I also, you mentioned the 5 rhythms,
Yeah.
Gabriel Roth started the 5 rhythms back in the 60s, and it's moving meditation.
Hmm.
And I started doing that. And I was able to return to my body, because what happens with trauma is you leave your body. So,
Okay.
it's good. It's important to understand how trauma works. And I think that's probably the most misunderstood source of suffering on our planet,
Hmm.
is thinking that trauma is something bad that we need to get rid of, that we need to fix, that it's a pathology or something. But actually, trauma is an amazing intelligence that's been
Hmm.
evolving for hundreds of thousands of years in the nervous system. So when we have an overwhelming, well, regardless of the level of trauma, when we have an overwhelming experience, the nervous system fragments and separates that overwhelming experience so we can
Okay.
continue going on.
Okay.
And in that, the problem though is it gets lodged in the body
Yeah.
as tension or numbness. But then having Gabrielle, I learned more and more how to be in my body.
Yeah.
And when I was in my body, then I had to turn, instead of turning away and suppressing the
Hmm.
things that happened to me, I had to turn towards those things. And of
Yeah.
course, that's the mystical perspective on healing, is you don't turn away whatever is hard or difficult or uncomfortable. You turn towards it and feel it as much as you can. And that allows you to integrate it. So it becomes just presence.
Yeah.
What, what I always say is integrated past. When I've been able to experience it and feel it, integrated past is just presence. Then you
Yeah.
just have the story. Unintegrated past is destiny. You're bound to be repeating it over and over and over. It's called repetition compulsion. And
Okay.
that's also a good thing, because what's happening is the nervous system is trying to heal. Just like if I cut my finger, if
Right.
I pick at it all the time and I'm trying to pull the scab off, I'm going to lose my finger. It's the
Right.
same.
Right.
It's the same thing with the nervous system. The nervous system is highly intelligent. It knows how to heal, just like a cut. Any other part of your body knows how to heal if you let it. So, that's when I started studying soul loss
Mhm.
and shamanism. I started teaching shamanism, which I have for many, many years. I worked in organizations, and slowly I began to, come closer to my soul and be able to more and more, learn from my own trauma and grow from
Mhm.
my trauma and help other people grow from their trauma. So, it's been quite a journey. Like I said, I'm 80, uh, and I have a pretty good life. I have a
Right.
wonderful partner. We
Beautiful.
teach together.
Beautiful.
And
Yeah.
for those of you who feel challenged, you
Mhm.
always have a choice to turn things around.
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you are employed or recently found yourself at the exit interview, I have a podcast for you. I'm Mark Carey, the host of the Employee Survival Guide, a podcast all about work and working. As a seasoned employment attorney, I will share with you information your employer definitely does not want you to know about and more. Stop getting screwed over by your employer. Get the tools of the legal trade to fight and win against your employer. Listen to the Employee Survival Guide by clicking the link in the show notes. Enjoy and be well.
What's the saying? It says pain is needed, suffering is optional, right? Isn't
That's
that,
right. Yeah.
I have to, one of the things that, when I first actually, got your biography is how to sensitively navigate something like this. You don't just ask like, this happened to you, tell me, right? So it's hard to really like you're willing to share that information, but I don't want to come across insensitive. Like, this is not, hey, I lost my car. You lost your wife under brutal, awful circumstances, right? So
Yeah.
those are always,
Yeah.
I can't even begin to stomach what you went through and what you still, are ultimately dealing with. I guess my question is that, when we see like the true crime shows on TV, or when we see like people are somewhat, I hate to say entertained by it, but it becomes kind of just like, can't wait to see the next one. But it is actually somebody in a family that went through a very traumatic event. So is sharing your story, is that helpful for you to navigate how people can go through things? How do people navigate versus telling it versus it becomes something else?
That's a really good question, Rashad. And I just want to honor your sensitivity too. I really appreciate the compassion and sensitivity that you have.
Oh my God.
So let's see. I had in my mind what I was going to say, and then I lost. Ask me the question again.
How do you navigate telling the story, right? Because there's so many different mediums out there that tell stories such, and I'm not saying such as yours, but you see it. Stories need to be told, but it can't turn into entertainment or like, oh, can't wait to watch the next, so to speak. So
right, yeah, thank you. That's really good.
What's that space that gets that's navigated with like stuff like that?
Well, first of all, we all have a story. Mm-hmm. We all have a hand too. Yeah. Right? I have a hand. Right. Am I my hand? No, I'm not. And I'm not my story either. Right. So, but when we're numb, like I would tell my story sometimes, and it was like I was talking about someone else. Okay. It was like a sidecar. This happened, but it wasn't coming through what I was feeling and experience. It was coming through a numbness. So you can't heal what you can't feel. Okay. You can have a story, right? But you can't heal it. The only way to heal it is to feel it, to integrate it, to go to the body, to go, I don't have huge regard for, talk therapy is fine. You can handle, whether you're brushing your teeth or not, or stop smoking, that's fine. But to deal with real trauma, you have to go to the body. You have to feel your body. You have to feel the sensations and the emotions of your body. And that's the challenge. And we live in a society that is totally numb. Look at what's happening in our country right now. People just, innocent people just getting shot in front of everyone else, people in cages, people getting exported, the violence. And that is also on the collective level, a repetition compulsion. All of this that's happening is all the unfinished past and brutality. It's that perpetrator, victim becomes perpetrator, perpetrator becomes victim. It's back and forth. And it's just gotten to such a degree that something has to change. What has to change is each of us have to do our own individual internal work. It's no longer works to say, they did this to me. It's more something happened to me that I have to work within myself. And the only way that we're going to have a democratic society, a fair society, a color blind or neutral society is to do our own inner work. Because my work has become looking at systems. So taking a systems perspective at violence, a systems perspective at abuse. And what I mean by that is much bigger than what people most might think. It's, it's what's happening in me, my energy, how much space I have, how I'm but that's an individual. But then I'm impacted by my ancestors. My ancestors have a huge impact on me. You go back 3 generations where someone was in a war and killed a bunch of people and had all that shame. That shame gets passed down until somebody faces it and said, wait a minute, this is not my shame. I'm carrying something from the past. It's in me. Because it's in my DNA and through epigenetics, it's in me. But it's and then I have to make the necessary adjustments to the way I'm living my life to be to heal that part of me. Healing is integrating. Healing means that I've meant it, I've felt it, I've allowed it to be done with. Right. But most of us are carrying a lot, and a lot of the trauma that we carry is early development trauma where I wasn't felt, seen, heard, held, or protected, or someone looking in my eyes with loving eyes, because I have to have co-regulation from a loving caregiver in order to learn how to self-regulate my own emotions and my own compassion and passions and all of that. So
Absolutely.
if I didn't get that, I need to have a place to do that. So community is the place. You know, you can do one-on-one with a therapist, and some people, that's all they can do. But
Correct.
when you're really doing the work, you have to create community. You have to work with people who are willing to be authentic and emergent. What does emergent mean? Mostly we speak from story.
Right.
You know, we don't listen, and we project our background onto somebody else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there are many levels of listening, and the most important is listening to ourselves, the subtle energy movement in our body. So meditation, contemplation, prayer, all of these things are really important. But having a community to work in. Now, I have a group of 15, 18 people or something. We come together either online or in a live situation. And somebody says, you know, I don't feel lovable, or I carry a lot of shame in my life, and they share that, and then half the people say, yeah, I do too. I have that same thing, and then it's like, oh, I thought I was the only one that carried that.
Isn't that weird how that works? You know, because I think, you know, that's the good part of the internet, right? Is that people can actually have these web conference calls and these sessions with people, and they found out that, you know, they're not by themselves in the emotions that they're held. And then what you find out deeper is that this has gone on with people for years, right? This is not something that suddenly sprung up, you know, and they woke up and not, you know, you're on the very, you know, your story, not very many people can relate to. So I don't want to make light of that. But there are people who still, you know, for their day-to-day trials are like, I've had this situation that I have dealt with and I've had nobody to turn to. And then that's why they have mood swings, or they, you know, weren't able to have stable relationships, or they were, you know, got into criminal activity because there wasn't an avenue, you know, to actually have these meetings to cope, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I have to just bring it back to, you know, each of us has the capacity to not just heal ourselves. When we step out of, say, you're in an alcoholic or a drug family, you know, or really in a bad situation, and there's certainly a lot of them in the world today.
Right.
And you hear the call, you hear a caller. Something says, this is not what I want. And I begin to look for something better. And when I hear that calling, that soft voice that says, you could heal this, you could do better. You know, I read a book, I do yoga, or I dance, or something in me, and I step out of my family system, and I kind of notice that I'm in a culture that things keep repeating. And that's the most important thing we could do. You know,
Beautiful.
Don't try to fix the world. The world is in here. So, you know, there's two ways to know people. One of them is that Rashad is over here in Detroit. I'm over here in California, and it looks like, he's over there, I'm over here, and we're separate, right? We're two people that are separate. But that isn't actually what's happening. What's happening is Rashad is over here in California in my nervous system. My capacity to know you is my capacity to feel you, to sense you in my nervous system. And I'm over there in your nervous system, and your ability to know me is by feeling me, by sensing me, by checking what's coming up. That's a totally different paradigm for knowing people. And when you look at relationships, I do a workshop called Relational Mysticism. And a lot of people come to me, oh, I'm having a hard time in my relationship. And I say, well, you know, if you're looking at your relationship, you're going to have trouble, because relationship is a noun. What does that mean? That means that the only thing I can know about you, Rashad, is what I've known from our past together.
Right.
So I continue to operate with you primarily out of who I've deemed you to be from the past, by how you look, your color, your way you talk, you know, all of that. And so when I switch that and I go, oh, wait, I'm relating. relating is not relationship. Relating is every moment is new.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are. I'm curious. I'm going to spend, I say to people that are in a marriage, I say, what if you woke up every morning and you looked over at the person, and instead of saying, "Oh, honey, would you brush your teeth?" or whatever you say, it's so hot in bed, you're sweating. Instead, you look over at her or him and you say, "Oh my God, who is this person that I'm sleeping with? What amazing things will happen today. How are we going to learn to be together today?" To bring curiosity, to bring the sense of wonder to relating. And then instead of speaking from a story, you become emergent and you notice, "Oh, I have feelings." And I say, "I'm feeling scared right now, sweetheart." And other person, "Oh, well, what are you scared about?" I'm scared that I'm going to this school and learning stuff, but I'm afraid if I get too smart, you're going to leave me. And then you have a conversation that's emergent, and then you come together, and every day is a new day to begin discovering, not just about the other person, but I call it somatic anthropology. I'm digging into all the layers that have been in me since birth and since the beginning of my ancestors, all the way back through time in Africa, and when I can do that, then every moment becomes an exciting journey.
Yeah, things are definitely more, one of the reasons this show was created was to get past the surface level, right? So you can exist or you can live, right? And you actually, and there are two distinct differences, right? You can go through the day-to-day motions and, sunrise, sunset, coffee, cereal, lunch, dinner, bed, or you can get to the depth of what makes people function, how they operate, what makes them them, and whether it's a CEO of a business or your own personal journey yourself, there are things that are deeper than what we see in front of us, and you owe it to yourself to navigate those spaces, to ask those difficult questions while being sensitive about it, because the reality about it is you only got one shot in this world to make an impact. Having a chance to do this podcast, I would never talk to you. I would imagine our paths wouldn't have crossed. To hear a story like this, to help somebody who navigated World War II trauma and then the situations that you had to navigate and came out willing to share and help other people. Can you talk about your book, like some details of how that became to fruition?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Everything you said, it's really beautiful, Rashad.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to say, Einstein said, either everything's a miracle or nothing is.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that.
Beautiful.
Because if I'm not looking for the miracles around me, I'm not alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
My book was a huge part of my healing.
Right.
It's called Traumatized: A Love Story. And it's really about recognizing, first of all, that there's a higher power that is just love, and that I'm a part of that. And that's a part of everyone has that, power, and that the nervous system is here to care for and love us. Mm-hmm. And so the parts that we push away and deny and don't love are the parts where we're stuck. We keep repeating the same things over and over and over again. So, my early childhood was one of nobody was there. And a lot of my life was nobody's here for me until I started to show up for me. So I tell the story. But in the book, first of all, I write the story. And that was really cathartic. It really helped me to just get it down on paper. And then I wrote, from an older perspective, here's how I see that story now. Mm-hmm. And then the third part of each chapter is, so how do I, the reader, then be able to work with my own story? So it's really not just an autobiography. It's a self-help book. It's Beautiful. Designed to take real issues and address them in a compassionate, caring, and creative way. Mm-hmm. And so, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's wonderful. That's wonderful. There's so many different paths your life could have took other than positivity. And I'm mind blown that you were able to navigate such a traumatic situation in life and ultimately willing to share it with people, because a lot of people, this is not something that people just come out and say, hey, by the way, this happened to me.
Most of the great teachers, Rashad, had a rough life.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
when you really look back
Yeah.
at the people that in history that you see what their life was like. Many of them had really harsh uh, uh, beginnings, or came from harsh circumstances too. And so I think the soul, which is the light that we're born into, that light of awareness, the soul, if we can slow down, everybody's going too fast right now. We have
Right.
to slow down and soften in order to heal. And,
Right.
and speed is trying to outrun your fear. You go fast because you don't want that to catch you. But unfortunately, fear will
Yeah.
always be catching you until you're willing to turn towards it and say, yeah,
And face it. I'm going to face this head on.
yeah,
I'm going to
and
face
face
this head on.
exactly. So that's
What?
the essence of the book, and it's really, also looks at the what I call AIC fluidity, the ancestral, individual, and collective. How all of that is part of who we are. We're not
Okay.
separate from our ancestors; they live in us. The everything that ever happened to our ancestors, not just the bad things, but the resilience, the resources. That's what we're missing by not honoring our ancestors, regardless of what they did. We are missing incredible resources because, think about it. You wouldn't be here if they weren't
Exactly.
resourceful. I wouldn't be here if they weren't resourceful. I mean, shit.
Yeah.
Your ancestors
Yeah.
probably came over on a slave boat.
There's a
And
very
you're
high
here doing
likelihood.
that show.
There's a very high. It's funny you say that because one of the reasons I never looked it up was because I didn't want to know. Right. And it sounds like, I mean, you'd have to be, ignorant of history to sit back and say, well, no, that would, being African American myself, like, that there's a high likelihood that what you said was true. But you're also like, I don't want to navigate that space because there's going to be something opened up that I don't want to know. You know what I'm saying? And that's like real. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, I don't want to read about that because
I know it is.
that's going to put me in a place where I don't want to see something like that. You could be at you could be sitting watching a Saturday movie and then you're like, oh man, this pops across your phone. You get little results of what popped up from whatever, history. And you're like, damn, man, now I'm feeling some type of way because I just read this horrible, horrible version of events. There could be some very sweet things in between. Somebody could have invented something. Somebody could have, built a business and had a community. But it's like, I don't want to know that 80% of what was there, 95% of what was there. I'm good not knowing that piece of information.
Yeah,
I
we
mean?
need. Yeah, are you familiar with My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Mekham?
No.
Oh my God, you should read that book. It's an incredible book. He's a Black therapist, and he looks at white people, Black people in the police, and how trauma works all through that, and how that relates to our ancestors. Beautiful, beautiful, brilliant
I'll have to check
book. Yeah, My Grandmother's Hands.
I'm going to write that down.
I highly recommend that, Rashad. But
I appreciate it.
the thing is that the pain of suppression is worse than the pain of facing it, and the cost of suppression is our life.
That's a beautiful statement. I have to, and I think that one of the things that when I got a chance to talk to you was, you're willing to, put yourself out there to let people know what you went through. And you're also showing people that there's a different path other than self-destruction. And I think that's very important because, oftentimes you can get on this show, and I've never heard a story like this, and I literally had to read it 3 or 4 times when I was reading like your bio. I'm like, this doesn't seem real. It seems like a movie, so to speak. Right? And so, but I always ask every listener, out of sensitivity and more importantly, just, for the purpose of the show, where can people find Michael Stone, and more information about you? I want, obviously you don't need me, but for the listeners here, how can we find this? How can we find it?
Yeah, well, my website is welloflight.com, WELLOFLIGHT.com. And unfortunately, about 4 to 6 months ago, my Facebook, which I had for many years, is down anyway. So I started a new one. So it's Well of Light, but more easier way is Instagram or LinkedIn or stuff like that. But go to my site, and also I'm always doing courses. The next course that I'm doing with the Shift Network starts in March. and it is about legacy burdens, about attunement to our intergenerational trauma, and how to tap into our ancestors for resources. So that's a really good course coming up with them, and they'll be putting a lot of stuff out. So the Shift Network. Also, I'm doing another year-long course for entrepreneurs who really want to have a healthy organization. I have 30 years of consulting to organizations as well. I was an organizational shrink for a lot of years. So that's coming up through the Pocket Project. So pocketproject.com, I think, or just look up Pocket Project. And that's international. People from many, many different countries will be working with us in those things. So
that's well, you got a busy plate on your hands. And like I said, I can't appreciate enough of your time that you're willing to share your story, and that's what the show is all about, to talk to individuals such as yourself. And I'm honored that you're willing to definitely have reached out to me to be able to share your story. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Brother Rashad. It's wonderful to meet you. If you need anything, let me know. I'm always here to support.
Thank you very much. Michael Stone on the Randomness of Nothing podcast. This is your host, Rashad Woods. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rashad.